So we're back. Welcome to the Parenting and I podcast. I'm Emma, and it's been a whole year actually since we launched the Parenting and I podcast. And I have to say that I'm surprised there are so many of you listening. It's really surpassed our expectations, and having lots of people listening all over the world as well, actually, which is a bit mind-boggling. But thanks for sticking with us. It's class to have you each month joining us as we discuss different topics that come up along the parenting journey and try and give you some interesting information and hopefully some tips along the way. This month we're going to be talking about that transition that can be an emotional and challenging change when you leave primary school and head off to big school. Many children have been attending opening evenings, preparing for transfer tests, sitting the tests, and maybe even getting their results this month. So we thought it was the perfect time to chat about the concerns that children and parents have around transition. And I'm joined by Charlene Briggs and Kelly Barber today to discuss this topic. How are you, Charlene?
Good morning, Emma. Hi there.
How are you, Kelly?
Morning, Emma. I'm good, thank you.
Good stuff. So let's maybe just start at the beginning in preparing for this massive change that children are going to go through. Charlene, you have a child that's getting ready to prepare for all that at the minute. Would you maybe be able to give us a bit of insight into what goes on around that?
Yes, absolutely. I have 3 children, all close in age, so they're all going to be due to go through that transition sort of simultaneously, almost year after year. So this is my first experience personally of having a child who's preparing for that transition. And I think one of the really valuable lessons I'm learning at a very early stage is that we need to go at our own children's paces, because every child is so different. And some of the things you think they may be concerned about, they're not, and other things that they seem to be concerned about. So at the moment, yes, we're doing the open evenings. I wasn't quite prepared for that because my oldest child is in P6, and I suppose before the start of this year, I'd been thinking I had another whole year to wait.
Yeah.
And I think one of the very early learning curves were in November, December, when our primary school let us know as parents, actually, when your child's in P6, that's when you need to be thinking about what school they might go or might attend, particularly if they're going to be sitting one of the transfer tests. So most of the secondary grammar schools all encourage P6 and P7 children and parents to go along. There's quite a short window of opportunity. Most of the open evenings are in around in January and into early February. And as we have learned, lots of them are on the same date at the same time, which again puts a little bit of stress onto families to try and then choose which school to go to, even for the open day or the open evening. And I think one of the things that we're really seeing quite early on is that an open evening can be really enticing for a child or a parent, but obviously that isn't necessarily what school life is going to look like in that school. So even some of the teachers in the schools that we have been going around have talked to us about that and said, look, you know, we've everything on display. We've every single piece of apparatus out in the PE hall. The science labs look phenomenal. You know, they've got smoothie bars and they've got like refreshment stands. And the reality is the schools don't normally look like that. So I think for me as a parent, it's about seeing everything they have to offer, but then talking to my child about the reality as well, that this isn't necessarily going to be what that school looks like on a daily basis, because certainly what's presented is the best of the best on the open evening, as you would expect you know, anybody to do. But I think in reality, I have to say, as a parent at the moment of a P6 child, going around the schools and having a look and hearing all the principals and seeing what's on offer has actually made the decision more complicated. Because the schools have all been fabulous. They've all been so welcoming. They've been different, yes, but they've all been very engaging and inviting to parents. So I think it's been a unique experience, but we've by no means made any kind of decision yet. And obviously it's really important to us. Our daughter has a voice as well, but she changes every day. One day it's a school, and then the next day, depending on something somebody has said, it's a different school, and then we're learning about how to get to the schools, what transport's going to be involved, and then that's affecting her decision because she doesn't want to have to travel for longer than an hour. So those kind of things are all we're just conversing about. We're under no pressure at the moment, but certainly at the start of the transition we're already seeing how stressful it could potentially be.
Yeah, and that's quite early on too,
Yeah.
as you say. And Kelly, you have a child who's been through all
Yes.
this already, and did she start first year this
yeah,
year?
first
Last
year in
year?
September,
Okay.
yeah.
So what about from your perspective, if you think back to where Charlene was or is now?
Well, firstly, I have to say I can't believe it was only a year ago. That's really overwhelming. What I would say to reassure parents is that it is a mixed bag of emotions. Both, all parts of the family feel it, but you do come out the other end quite unscathed, and it does become a very distant memory, as it is for me at the moment and for Emily. So I think the biggest part of it for us was the waiting, that feeling of you're in limbo. So you do the tests, you wait for the results, you choose your school, and then you're waiting again to find out what school you've been accepted into. And I think actually that wee window is almost the hardest part, because then you're building up scenarios in your head. Emily had her dream school, the one she wanted to go to, and she was thinking, well, what if I don't get to go to that school? What am I going to do? All my friends are going to be there. So it was trying to reassure her that, look, whatever happens, we'll work through it together as a family. You're not on your own. For us, everything did work out quite well. She did get into the school she wanted. So she is settling in quite well, I have to say. Now, there were a few wee hurdles at the start, in terms of kind of managing all these new subjects she was going to have to learn, and more than anything, all these books and folders and papers that she had to carry each day. So that was a learning curve for her, and kind of the size of the school that she was going into. So hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pupils compared to much less than that in her primary school. So there were a few things that she did have to overcome, but I have to say she has settled in quite well. But we were very mindful of the fact that reassurance, being there for her, being present for her, listening to any worries that she had, and not sort of palming them off and, look, it'll be fine, don't worry. It was very much, well, look, what is it that you're specifically worried about, and what can we do to help you? So we did all of that, and it seems to have worked out for the best, really.
Well, that's good. Taking it back before we even get to the transition itself, and thinking about the process, before they even get to moving school, there's a lot of stress for the child, and for their parents as well, up until that point. So, I mean, even just thinking about myself going through it, I was 10 at the time when I had to do my 11 plus, as it was then. So I only had to sit one test, whereas, I mean, some children are sitting multiple now. But I was a very shy and nervous, already very nervous child. And I just remember the whole thing being terrifying. I wasn't particularly good at school. Academically, I mean, I was just average. And so I was sent to a tutor, as well, and I hated it. And so I spoke to mum and dad about it just before coming to do the recording this week, just to get their thoughts on it. And they just said, well, we wanted to give you the same opportunity as others, because there was other children in the class being tutored, and just to give you the best chance. And I get that, because obviously as a parent you do want your child to do well. But it's clear to me that there's a lot of pressure on parents too when that's going on. If other children are being tutored, you kind of think, I don't want my child to be at a disadvantage. And then I can kind of identify with that waiting around too, for the results. That's nerve-wracking for both the children and the parents. Now, as it turned out, for me, the tutoring did help. I did a bit better than expected, but I didn't do well enough to get into the school that I wanted. And so then there's the disappointment that comes with that as well. And I do remember feeling a little bit apprehensive about that, because I ended up going to a school that was much further away, and I didn't know anybody there either. But I do remember also being reassured by mum and dad, and they helped me kind of prepare for that transition as well. So drawing on my own experience, I guess, I do think it's a very stressful time for children, worrying about what grades they need to get and whether they're going to secondary or grammar school. I guess off the back of that very long-winded anecdote about my experience, I'm just wondering really if you have any thoughts around the whole process and the impacts that it has on children and of course their parents.
I think sometimes we forget the impact that we have as parents on our children, and you're absolutely right, and this spans across so many issues, and transitions is the one we're talking about today, but you know, you're that child's role model for the main part. Yes, they're going to be observant teachers and other people that'll be role models in their life, but for the most part, as a parent, you're the person that child looks to. So if you are demonstrating more significant levels of stress than you normally do, or are appearing concerned about something, then your child will observe that and will be more likely to take that on board. There is immense amounts of pressure on parents, and there's undoubtedly hopefully change is going to be made to our education system to try and look at all of these things around the transfer test and what's acceptable for our children from the age of 9, which most of them are in P6 when all of this begins, right the way through then to they make the transition when they're around 11. But as you say, there's things around tutors and decisions for parents to make, and whether both from a financial perspective and also from a personal perspective, whether parents want to put that pressure on their child. But then, as you say, there's peer pressure, and a lot of parents feel pressurised into being told that to give their child the best chance they need to do that. So I suppose what I would encourage is each parent and each family to make their own decisions, what's right for them and for their child. If the child is going to a tutor and the family has chosen that as a path for them, it's to make sure that the child is thriving in that environment. There's absolutely no point in investing in a tutor and putting additional pressure on yourself as a family financially and on your child if the child isn't getting or gaining from it. So it's about observing what that looks like, and is your child thriving in that environment. I mean, most schools also will provide support, so it isn't necessarily essential to send your child to a tutor, even though lots of parents believe that it is. So parents can be equipped by their primary school if they are choosing the path of doing those transfer tests for their children, and there's often booster classes and information seminars for parents and lots of different things available. So I'd encourage parents to talk to their child's own teacher and indeed the head teachers of the schools about what's available there maybe first, and then look at what there are gaps and what the benefits or the disadvantage is going to be around a tutor. But I think most importantly, it's about parents managing their own stress so that they have got opportunities to self-care and are minding their own mental health and well-being, because that will have such a big impact on your child. So it's about prioritising your own well-being as a parent to be able to provide the best support you can to your child at this quite difficult time. And I think one of the really interesting pieces of research, and I think both of you had noted it in our transitions paper that's available on our website, is that although we talk about the challenge of transition and the stresses it brings, research would actually indicate that most children, I think it's in excess of 70% of children, find it quite easy. So although we're always concerned about the what ifs, in the reality, yes, there will certainly be some children who will struggle for whatever reason, but most children will actually find the transition quite straightforward. So I think it is about, you know, not always necessarily looking at the downsides of transitions. Transitions can bring a whole new world, a whole new set of friends, a whole new interest in a sport or an after-school club that they haven't had an opportunity for before. So as well as looking at, I think, the challenges of transitions, is about the opportunities it brings as well, and as families, parents, not to lose sight of that. And that's certainly one of the things that we've been looking at really keenly in the schools that we're looking at, and we're looking at a whole range of different academic skills, but also about the additionality. So what clubs do those schools have? What after school activities do they have? What sports have they got? Because if your child's got a particular interest, it would be really great if the school that they can go to can really harness that and open new opportunities that aren't just academic. So I think it's about trying to look in a broader sense rather than just focus on the academic, would be my thoughts around that.
Yeah, I agree. I remember when we were looking at the schools, every time we left, I said the same thing to Emily. Try and get involved in as many clubs and after schools activities as you can. You'll be absolutely fine then. And it is, as you say, Charlene, it's about, you know, finding a new opportunity, something that you've never had before, that you can really thrive at, but also making new friendships, which I think is so important, especially in those early stages of year 8, because to go in, you know, not knowing very many people. I know in Emily's situation, she was very lucky. She had other girls that were coming with her, even her best friend. But there were, I think, a couple of girls that had come from maybe 15 miles, so from the very periphery of our area, and they were coming on their own and maybe having to make 2 or 3 bus rides to get to school, and they got there and, you know, they were feeling a bit isolated and alone, but I have to say, I think the schools are really well equipped. They know that these year 8s are going to be struggling. They know they're going to have all these different challenges that they're going to have to face. So they do have mechanisms in place to try and help and support the year 8s. And certainly in Emily's school, I have to say I've been really impressed. Whenever she first found out she was coming into the school, she got a little letter, welcome, we're going to look really forward to seeing you at the school. And then we were invited to come along to a one-to-one meeting where she met a teacher from the school. And I was there, but it was very much the teacher and Emily, and I tried to say things and I was just ignored. And I was kind of like, this is not about you, this is about Emily. So they were asking her questions about her strengths and things that she might be worried about. And she, in primary school, she was very involved in football and athletics, and she was told, well, look, we have these clubs, you can get involved in them. And she has done that. But there is structures in place. So you've got those meetings, and then they go in only for a few hours each day when they start. I think on Emily's first day they had a treasure hunt to help them to find their way around the school, which I thought was really good. And then 2 or 3 weeks in, they all went out to an outdoor activity centre. So it was about that team building. So they recognise that actually at this stage it's not about going straight into the learning. It's about having those foundations of good friendships and those social skills as well, about, well, how will I talk to a new person, because I've had this circle of friends for so long, I haven't really needed to. But here's somebody that I've never met from a different area that I live in. How can I strike up a conversation? So they do all of that sort of thing through activity and play and all of those really vital things. In terms of the supports in the school, they had older girls that acted as peer supporters, which was great. So the older girls actually took them around the treasure hunt. So they formed that relationship so that if they did have an issue, this person wasn't going to be completely unknown to them, which I thought was really good. I guess the main point of contact would be their form tutor. So they see them consistently every day. They're not seeing these other 10 subject tutors every day, but they do see their form tutor, which is really, really good. So they would be a support and they'd be a first point of contact.
It's something that I was thinking about in terms of when you leave primary school, you're kind of a big fish in a wee pond.
Absolutely.
By the time you're P7, you kind of you're slowly given that wee bit more responsibility and things. And then when you go into big school, you're the wee one again, and kind of, so that's quite a nice idea. Having the older ones help out, and I guess even all those things of meeting new people and getting into new sports and activities and things like that is all really helpful to help the child settle in as well. So yeah, that's really good, and even knowing that there's more, that'll be reassuring to parents to know that there's more kind of in-school support outside of just kind of what you're doing at home as well. But I suppose something that is really important and something that we would advocate Parenting NI is those relationships between schools and parents. And that'll be important in reassuring you as a parent as well, I guess, when you're going through that transition, and maybe getting to know, as you say, their form teacher, because that is something I think that's nearly used when you're in P7, like as kind of like a fear factor, like, oh, you wouldn't get away with that in big school, or you'll have all these different teachers and different subjects, and that is, I think, maybe a wee bit daunting as well. You're going into this big school and you're not having the consistency of the same teacher, and you're learning different languages and different subjects you maybe haven't done at primary school. So what would be the advice for parents maybe when it comes to dealing with school, keeping those lines of communication open?
I think some of those things that you have just mentioned, for me, it's about how you positively talk about them. So some of those things could certainly be challenging to children where they're having to move around a bigger school. But if you think about the positives, even as you're talking, that you don't have to sit in the same classroom with the same people, with the same teacher all day, every day, about the opportunities that brings, that, you can move around. You're going to, second class is home economics, which is your favourite, and you've that to look forward to, etc., etc. So it's trying to always look at what maybe the concerns are going to be for the child, but looking then at what the positive sides of that are going to be as well. Some of the other things that we looked at when we did our paper for the website was things that are quite easily achievable for families but we forget about. So it's about your child being well fed and well rested. So a child who hasn't had a good night's sleep for whatever reason is more likely to struggle when they get into school, particularly if it's a new environment, particularly if their anxiety levels are already high for whatever reason. So it's really important to try as far as possible, accepting that your child is going through a developmental phase and it may not be easy to get to sleep and all those things, but to try and help your child have an environment that's as conducive as possible, so you have a regular bedtime routine, even though your child is at that older age. It's maybe not the same as a toddler going to bed at 6:30, 7:00, but they still have a good routine, and that there's some quiet time and whatever that pattern is. And then the next morning, and I know it's a bit contentious, and we've talked about this with many parents, is breakfast and ensuring your child has something in their tummies. I would say not get overly anxious about it, but it is important that if at all possible your child has a reasonable breakfast, because again that's fuel for them for the day. It gets their brain going, it gets them set up and ready for the day. Some children aren't going to be able to eat a full 12-piece fry in the morning, so go with what suits them. You know, it may be a piece of fruit and a piece of granary toast, and if that's what works for them, then that's still a reasonable breakfast to be sending them out. But it's those small things that you can put in place as a parent to prepare your child to help them then ease into school. They're going in, they're feeling they're not hungry, they're well rested, they're thinking about the positives, not necessarily focusing on the challenges they're going to have, and starting from there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just following on from that, Charlie, and I have to say that sleep is so important. Now Emily, if she could, she would stay up to 1 or 2 in the morning. But obviously working in this environment, in parenting I sort of knew, right, we need to get these boundaries in place for whenever she starts school, because obviously the whole summer where everything is just relaxed, it's do what you want, you know, all this kind of thing. But coming into September, we kind of had a conversation, and I don't know how much of it she took in, but she kind of was aware that, you know, coming into this new school year, there would be some changes and we would be putting these boundaries in place. And bedtime routines would be a big one, definitely. So we made it very clear that, you know, yes, she can use her mobile phone, but it would be taken away to charge overnight. So that is one of the strictest rules that we have. That phone does not go into her bedroom.
Oh, very good.
No, definitely not.
I
And it was about doing
that
it
myself.
Yeah, I think we're probably all good. But it was preparing her, right? So it wasn't like a shock to her system. It's just what works for us. So, it's about what works for each individual family, because everybody's different. But it seems to be going okay for us at the minute.
Yeah. And I suppose if we kind of go back as well in terms of preparing, say the child's just starting big school, and it's about kind of taking away those like myths, I suppose, as you were saying around. So things like, I mean, I remember doing, because I didn't go to I didn't get into the school that I wanted to go to. I ended up going to a school. Now it was my second choice, but it was further away from where I lived, so I had to get 2 buses. You know, one into town, one out to the end of the school, and I remember doing the journey with my dad. You know, doing things like that. So in the lead up to it, so that I wasn't freaked out by getting the bus by myself into town. Now eventually my sister did come, and then we had each other, and you make friends on the bus and things like that. Even knowing things like that, well, you'll meet new people and all, and knowing maybe the child's timetable, so things like because you may be concerned, or the child's maybe concerned about all these different classrooms to get to. And I think, well, certainly whenever I was at school, they did all that kind of run through with you, what departments were in which section of the school, and just kind of familiarising your child with those things, which kind of takes away that air of maybe apprehension around that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. We live in the country, and transport is definitely a key contributor to all of our thoughts about where our daughter's going to go to next when she reaches secondary school age, because realistically, you know, to start travelling further afield is going to mean more buses, more trains, and it's just going to be more difficult, and also costs for many families, because there may be implications for families again if they live more rurally about what's available for them. So I think, you know, when again your primary school will hopefully help prepare parents as well as the children for those kind of transitions. So again, when I was talking to my daughter about what schools, we were trying to be realistic that she wasn't choosing schools that were like 3 towns away, that you know wasn't going to be easy for her to get there, both time wise, and then even from a safety point of view, about where or how she was going to actually physically get there, and even what time then she'd get home at. You know, so we were saying, well, if you go to a school here, that means you might get home at 4:30, but if you go there, you mightn't get home to after 5 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about taking all those things into
Yeah.
consideration. And I do think transport is one of the things that you don't necessarily think of straight away,
Mm-hmm.
but is actually really important. And as you have suggested, Emma, I think it's definitely a run through the journey. As I say, we're still a year off making final decisions.
Yeah.
We've already drove to the schools that we're thinking of over the weekend, and we're saying to our daughter, look, that's where the bus or train might let you off, that's where you'd have to walk to.
Yeah.
So we're starting to plant the seed in her head that she's going to have to become more independent.
Yeah.
Because again, living in the country, there isn't those opportunities. I mean, she's not used to getting buses or trains or anything by herself, so this is quite a big step for all of us,
Yeah.
I have to say. So again, it's about me keeping a check on my emotions, where I'm thinking, oh my goodness, she's going to have to get like a bus and a train and do this and do that. So I keep those thoughts to myself and not necessarily in front of her, because I know she feeds immediately off that. So even if she wasn't concerned, she will be concerned if she thinks that I am worried.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be as positive as possible and reassuring, but letting her see what that is. And as both of you said, there are other children making that journey every single day. So it's about looking at, and we've talked to other families with older siblings at schools, and they've said, oh yeah, my daughter gets that bus and this is what she does. And you know, it's about that constant reassurance, because it's hugely different than, like, I drop my children off at primary school at the moment. So from going from your parent dropping you at the door of your little itty bitty primary school to then thinking you're going to have to get a train to Belfast followed by a bus or whatever.
That is daunting actually for the parent as well.
Yes,
just as
it
you're
is.
saying
We
that,
more so,
because
I would
you're going there each day. You know the teacher. You're maybe getting to chat to the teacher. You probably know your other children in, obviously, in your child's class. Maybe the parents as well. You might be seeing them at the school gate. Whereas when they go to biggest school, it's like, who is this child? Who's your new friend? Who's one of their parents? You know, you kind of have all those things going on too.
That's absolutely right. And I think primary school provides lots of parents with really wonderful opportunities of meeting other parents. And I certainly have benefited from my child being at a school where I've then made lots of really good friendships with parents of children of similar ages.
Yeah.
And I've already been reflecting that is likely to change.
Yeah.
You know, even my conversations with them, we've all got different, because we live in slightly different areas, we've all got slightly different thoughts. So the chances are a reasonable proportion of us are going to end up in different places. And as you say, as a parent, then you have to be prepared that, well, those friendships, everything could change for you too. And you're going to be the new parent at the school gate. And it's not even the same at the school gate. We all know what primary schools can be like, with parents all congregating at the 3 o'clock bell, and there are those opportunities. It's different, as you say, when your child goes to big school, and the chances are they'll be getting transport themselves, so you won't maybe be at that school gate very often. So that all looks very, very different for parents as well as the children.
Yeah, I know. The more we're talking here now, it's starting to sound like it's all very daunting again. So maybe to round up, can we have some, like, well, Kelly, you've been through it all now.
Yes.
Let's have some positives and maybe some, not that there wasn't positives. I think we've discussed an awful lot of good stuff here that will be very reassuring for parents. But maybe just some takeaways for this month's episode in terms of managing that transition with your child.
Well, I would say, having gone through it, the first thing really is that it does seem very hard at the moment, but you do come through it, and whatever happens, you make a plan and you see it through. So there's always everything. I mean, I think everything usually works out okay in the end. I've seen Emily really flourish actually. Now, she has grown up very quickly, I must say, but in a good way, and she's given all these new opportunities, and yes, there are challenges, but that's life. And it's a good learning skill for her to realise that, you know, everything doesn't go according to plan sometimes, and you do have to have a wee bit of resilience. You do have to learn how to bounce back from things when they go wrong, but as I say, it usually does all work out okay for the best in the end.
Okay, in the end.
That's what I would say, yeah, definitely.
And obviously I'm a parent who has yet to go through it, so you can talk to me in a year and a half to see how that's all went. But I think one of the things that I've already taken as a real positive from going through the open nights and I've been bringing my 3 children around with me, as I say, who are slightly younger, and it's given them a real enthusiasm for things that they have yet to experience. So for example, science, and as I say, the laboratories, yes, we're all kitted out with the latest, every Bunsen burner burning and every experiment going. But I have to say then my boys have been really enthused by that, and one of them is now saying he wants to be a scientist, and he's so excited about all, and he's been asking me about atoms and molecules.
Wow.
And so it's already piqued an interest in them.
Yeah.
And my daughter, whose turn it is to go through the transition, she's talking about drama, and she wants to go to a school that places a good emphasis on having lots of opportunities with regards to plays and dramas and musicals, because that's something she's really interested in. So although yes, as we've reflected, it is a process that we need to be prepared for some challenges, I think all in all the opportunities by far outweigh the challenges that we may have to overcome. It's about being prepared for them, and it's about you as a parent being that positive role model as far as possible for your child. And when there is a blip, as Kelly suggested earlier on, it's been really open and transparent and talking about it with your child. If they're concerned about things that might seem trivial, just ask them what exactly is the detail of that, and let's talk about that. And the reality is, your fears are probably not going to be compounded. So it is about looking at this as an opportunity as to all the new subjects they're going to have at their disposal, and all the different opportunities and all the new friendships. Primary schools are quite small, which is great for that age group, but it limits their opportunities to meet people from more diverse backgrounds and things like that as well. So I'm really excited, in equal measures I would say, apprehensive about the opportunities that the transition is going to provide my daughter.
I have to say, talking to you both today about this particular topic, the thing that has struck me is just relationships, which a lot of these things actually boil down to. So your relationship with your child, talking to them about it, preparing them for what's to come. And you probably get a bit of both ways from that. You're getting a bit of reassurance from your child maybe as well at times about what's going on in school, but also then with your relationship with the school as well, and checking in with teachers and preparing yourself for what's going to be happening in school. And if I suppose if your child maybe doesn't settle, that you as well, maybe as you thought, that you have those communication lines open there with the school as well. Thanks very much for listening this month. As we suggested earlier in the episode there, you can go onto our website and have a look at the research paper that we've produced around transitions. Another thing to note maybe actually while we're talking is that applications for primary school are open as well, so that's another transition that your child might be going through. Maybe going from nursery into primary school. You can check out the Education Authority's website around the digital applications for that. And if you're worried or concerned, our support line is also there. You can contact us on free phone 0808 8010 722. Charlene and Kelly, thank you so much for chatting to me this month about a topic that hopefully will reassure lots of parents. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.